Hello, welcome back to the Tracy Developer Meetup. So this is our August edition, and I am Nick, the Tracy Developer Organizer. And with me tonight, we have Josh from TekSystems. So this is actually a kind of different night compared to what we normally do at this particular meetup. So typically, what we're doing is very technical oriented stuff. But tonight we're actually going to do some resume building and help everyone in this channel understand what makes a good resume to help them land that jobs that they've always wanted. Before we hand it over to Josh, though, I want to go over some logistics. So we are live. Please drop some questions in the chat if you have them, and I will pass them over to Josh as we progress. If there's any kind of audio or video issues, let me know in the chat so that way we can work to correct them right away. Other than that, I think, Josh, are you ready for this?
I'm all about progressing.
Awesome. Well, then I am going to hand it over to you, and you can take it away.
All right. So my name is Josh Gurin. I am a technical recruiter with TekSystems. Been in the business about 23 years. So I've been there and I've done that, so to speak. I focus on the Sacramento market, but I'm also national. And I'm technical-esque. I mean, I'm not coding today, but I have coded. I know what malloc does. So if anyone is curious about specifics, I can get reasonably down and dirty in the technical stuff as to what's and who's looking for what, etc. So the presentation as a whole is really more geared towards resume writing in general, common misconceptions about what you should and shouldn't do, how you should and shouldn't do it, and it should apply across the board. It should not be exclusively geared towards the technical subset, although obviously that's my specialty. So if anybody has any questions, please hit me. But this is some advice that's been holding true for a long time. It is definitely updated into current. Towards the end of the presentation, we'll get into how COVID has affected things, because it has. But yeah, that's the plan. So why should you guys care about what I'm about to say? Essentially, what don't you know behind the scenes that's happening? When you send your resume somewhere, you apply for a job, either by sending it to HR, sending it to an agency, or sending it to the company directly from an online position, typically online posting. There are basically 4 stages of review that happen once you hit send. Okay, and most people really only think about the first one, or the third or fourth stage. Right now, the market is great. There is a lot of hiring happening for technical professionals. They're in extreme demand, but it's not as great outside of the technical field. There are several areas that are a little bit impacted and not they're oversaturated. And so, yes and no, both and. So what do you do to get noticed? What do you want to realize is happening behind the scenes once you hit that send button and fired your resume off? We'll talk about the structure of the resume in a moment as to how to combat these realities, but these are the realities on the ground that you're facing, okay? The first is that your resume is going to go through a Boolean search. So they are literally going to have an algorithmic search string. They're going to take that and fit it against your resume, down, no human beings at all, okay? They're going to get a, did you satisfy the minimum quals that they're looking for in terms of skill sets, search terms, and if possible, if they have an AI that's sophisticated enough, years of experience. But usually, more often than not, it's just the fact that is it on the resume or not? Yes or no, qualified, disqualified, gone, right? So the first 2 stages of those 4, they're disqualifying. It's easier, it's simpler. Back in the day, around about 2009, there were no jobs, right? So they became bombarded by resumes, hundreds, if not thousands. And they simply could not look through them all. So they started disqualifying before they started figuring out who was qualified. And that really just never stopped. They just kind of kept doing it. And so if you're looking for a job, the top 3 things that are part of that job in terms of the mandatory qualifications or skill sets involved, you've got to make sure they're on your resume, or you'll get blown out in the Boolean search itself. So that's the first stage of review. Pretty easy, no people. Second stage, it's typically what we call the stack rank. More often than not, you're going to have people that have 20 years experience and they mention the vital skill 2 or 3 times. And then you'll have people with 2 years experience and they'll mention the vital skill 15 or 20 times. Okay. The reality is that the people that mention it more are going to get a little bit more visibility. You don't want to spam them. It's not that you're going for something cheesy or obviously flukish, or you know what I mean. You don't want to present it in a way that's obviously disingenuous. But if you are, I've literally had this happen. I've had people ask me, I was perfect for that job. Why didn't they even call me? And I'm looking at their resume. I'm like, you had 2 hits on your resume in terms of that search. I have 20 years experience. Yeah, but your keyword was in there twice. And the guy with 2 or 5 years experience had it in there 15 or 20 times. Who would you pick? If you're an HR rep that doesn't know what from what, and you were trying to disqualify people before you're trying to qualify people, it's just faster. You got 100 resumes, you can just shave off 70 of them, and then you have 30 to worry about instead of having 60 to worry about. It's just faster. Okay, they're doing this at least they were doing it of a necessity, and the procedure just became the mantra, right? So that's the second stage, is the stack rank based on frequency of keyword hits. You don't want to spam them out, but I'd rather 5% spammy-ish than 95% nobody even looked at it, right? So once you've been put in the probably maybe pile, you've survived the first 2 stages, you go to the at a glance stage, which is the third stage. It's like a strafing run. It's like, right? It's 1 to 3 seconds per page. They will literally take and visually scan through your resume, not reading, but just, ripping through with a wide angle lens. If they see a bunch of what they're basically looking for, in other words, if your resume kind of reaches out and pops them on the chin, okay, they'll put you in the probably yes file. If they rip through the page and they don't really basically see what they're looking for at a glance, they'll put you in the probably no pile. And if the only reason they're going back to that probably no pile is if nobody in probably yes worked out. Okay, so that third stage, that's where the resume format that I'm about to suggest in a moment, that's where that comes in particularly handy, because it survives both the scrutinous review and the at a glance, strafing right across the page when you're finally in front of a human eye, but you're still in danger of not being seen for what you're actually capable of. That might make a little more sense when I show you the actual format, but the fourth stage, the final stage, that's the scrutinous review. That's somebody who's actually going to read your resume, more often than not, right before they conduct the interview. So let's do that sentence one more time, right? They're going to read your resume for the first time after you've been chosen to be in the interview. Okay, that's pretty relevant. You know what I mean? I will often tell people, if they have to read your resume to figure out you're qualified, you're probably not qualified, or at least you won't appear that way, even if you are. So those 4 stages really come into play in terms of how you craft the document that you're looking at. It's you have to know your audience, right? The disqualification cipher is much more pessimistic in nature, but it's effective, and people like to feel effective. HR reps like to feel like they're doing their job. You know what I mean? Even if they just want to get through their job and go home, HR reps aren't always the happiest lot in existence. I mean, my entire industry often exists based on a lot of HR reps not wanting to do a scrutinous review, at a highly effective level, but they want to feel effective, and disqualifying, getting a pile of maybes, and then sorting through that maybes as to 1 or 2 or 3 they actually send to the interview. That feels like they're doing their job properly, and they are in fact doing a review. They're just doing it kind of upside down. So here's the document that I'm talking about. This is the actual resume format that I'm suggesting.
Josh, do you want me to help you share your screen again?
Oh, I got it. Yeah, I got it. Hold on one moment. The answer is the Daily Double. Got it. Okay, here we go. So this is just an example of the document that I'm suggesting. Please note that anything that achieves this end is fine. It does not have to mimic this format verbatim. If you achieve the objectives that this is trying to conquer, in other words, if you survive all 4 stages of that scrutinous review effectively, you're good. You just want to be able to survive the Boolean search, the stack ranking, the at a glance quick look, and the actual scrutinous review when you're reading it once you're done. This document does that fairly well. So it's a suggestion, not a must, but as a first run or a living document, this tends to get you most of the way down that road. So put your name, contact, and phone on top. Have an objective. It does not have to be lengthy, short and to the point. If you are able to cite the exact job title of the position you're looking for, especially if you sprinkle it in among 2 or 3 others that you're willing to accept, one more keyword search, right? You actually have that particular hit in the resume for free. So, just a thought. Something to also add is mention if you're okay to be on site or if you're only okay for remote. That solves a lot of problems and it, reduces a lot of confusion, especially nowadays. Again, we'll talk about how COVID has had an impact on hiring in the industry towards the end, but it's a big deal and it definitely matters. So putting it right at the top gets you a lot more traction.
Josh,
Yes.
question. In regards to mention if you're willing to be on site or remote, is that going to limit your if people want to reach out? I mean,
in a way, it can actually expand if people want to reach out, in the sense that if you're willing to be on site, especially if you're willing to relocate in order to be on site, that can help you. If you're only looking for remote, it actually demonstrates I'm already set up for remote and I don't have to get set up for remote. So that could help you in that regard as well. So it could go both ways. But I mean, if the reality on the ground is you can only do remote or you can only do on site, I would say so. I mean, that's hardly going to give you damage that isn't. Well, you don't want a job you can't take anyway. So what's the difference, right?
Sure.
That's my 2 cents. I just feel like if you're upfront about that, you're not wasting your or their time by saying, the job's in Colorado. Are you mobile? Like, well, yeah, probably not, unless I said I was. The remote thing's a big deal though, and that comes more and more into play as we go on. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to mention it. So again, more on that later. The skills summary. This is not by putting it here, you don't actually get credit for it. Okay. A lot of people will put a skills summary at the top of the resume and they'll say, this skill set, 10 years. It doesn't, that doesn't actually work. That doesn't actually count. The skills summary isn't something to eliminate. I would keep it, but it doesn't actually get you credit for it until you redundantly restate it in the job where it actually happened. So if it's at the top and it's not the job, that's just something you read about. That's not something you've actually done. Make sure there's a 1-to-1, if not 1-to-many ratio of the skills in the skills summary and the skills in the actual job descriptions where they occurred. That's how they get to the bottom of your resume in the scrutinous review. They'll say, for example, in stage 4, must have 8 years experience.
Josh, I think we lost your sound. I don't know if it's just me.
I can hear myself. Can you guys hear me?
Can anyone else in the chat confirm to see if Josh's sound cut out?
I'm able to hear. Can you guys hear me?
I personally don't hear you. I don't know if it's just me or not.
I'm not muted.
Daniel, Sam, Kevin, Victoria didn't cut out, so it must be me. Sorry to interrupt.
Right, I'll
fix it on my
end. You guys
end.
can hear me? Yay, thumbs up. I should continue with my little prattle. Okay, so in the skills summary, just make sure that you are restating what you've done in such a way that it allows you to get credit for that experience. Because if you only put it in the skills summary at the top and you don't put it in the job descriptions, they're not going to count it. There we go. There it is. Okay, so how do you write the actual job descriptions themselves, right? That's really what most people ask me in terms of when they ask me about resume writing. This format from top to bottom, if you repeat that for each individual job that you've held, should do the trick. Now, here's what's interesting about this. It's almost upside down, right? They are going to look at the bullets first. Note that we're already in stage 3 of the 4 stages, right? The Boolean search has already happened. The stack rank based on that Boolean search has already happened. The number of hits on the resume has mattered or not mattered. You don't want to be too spammy, but you don't want to be so unspammy that they don't know you did it. All that's done, right? We're in stage 3 of the review right now, where a human being is looking at your resume for the first time, and they're looking at it quick. They're just ripping through the page because I got 12 more after yours, right? So the bullets right here in the middle are usually what my eye catches first. And these should not be sentences. These should be bullets, 5 to 8 words, maybe. These are not paragraphs. This is the marketable stuff you've done. This is the stuff that's directly related towards the job or jobs that you're targeting that people would want to know you have experience in. Even if a non-technical HR rep doesn't know what they are, write them down. It's like dependency injection and REST APIs and microservices. This is where you want to say that stuff. Explaining how you did it, not just that you did it, can be beneficial, but keep it short. These are bullets to catch someone's eye. The next thing they see is going to be the skills used. Now, this should be your laundry list. This should be your 1-to-1 ratio from absolutely anything in the skills summary above. This is where you put it, right? Everything, hard skills, soft skills, acronyms. You want to make sure that you're talking about, did you mentor anyone? You know what I mean? Like anything that is legitimate in terms of you being a qualified person for a particular job, it goes in here. If you don't write it down, you didn't do it. Plain and simple. Okay? And here's where that laundry list catch-all takes place, so that they are absolutely required to associate that skill set with this timestamp. Okay, when you say 10 years of experience in project management and you don't mention project management in this job description, well, they just Control F search it. They will step through often, not always, but they will often step through your resume with Control F in Microsoft Word or whatever it is. Thunk, thunk, thunk. When they hit, they look up to the right, grab the dates, write the dates down next year's experience, go to the bottom and tally. That is how they quote unquote read your resume. So 8 years experience in Java. If it doesn't say Java anywhere in this job description, you didn't use Java in these dates. But I talked about Spring and microservices, and you can't do it without Java. Well, you didn't say Java, so why would an HR rep know that? Right? Pander to your audience. Your audience, the first wave of scrutiny, they're not usually technical. They don't know that C# has anything whatsoever to do with .NET. Why would they know that? They're not coders. So be explicit. Again, if you didn't write it down, you didn't do it. And the 8-10 years of experience minimum qualification that the HR rep was given in order to put people forward for that interview that are qualified, this is how they get to that total, not because you put it on top. So last but not least is stage 4 with the scrutinous review. That's going to be where the paragraph comes in. That paragraph is essentially you talking directly to the interviewer. All right. This is you having a conversation with the person that is actually qualified, knows what you do. If you're going after a technical job, that person's technical. This is where you talk about the meat and potatoes of why they should pick you over someone else that looks very similar to you. These are the distinctions. These are the kind of like the, everybody else did it, but I did it this way, or I've got this particular part of it, or you know what I mean? Something that is more than just marketable, but stands out with you as an individual. This can be paragraphical. This is, I would advise against a novella. I mean, try to keep it 3 to 10 lines long. You still want it to be readable in right before the interview. If they haven't read your resume, and you're on your way from the front office to the interview room, they're looking at your resume as you're walking. So, give it time that it can be read in that kind of time frame. But that's what this is. So note, first, second, last. The first thing you write about is the last thing they look at. So again, if they have to read, quote unquote, your resume to realize you're qualified, that might not happen until the selection on if you get the interview or not has already occurred. So please note that forcing them to read it, they don't always have time. So they'll read it eventually, but often just right before the resume. After that, and do that for each chronological position held. Then your education, then what I would like to consider additional self-study and personal projects. You have carte blanche in here. You can talk about anything. Things you've studied, things you've read, things you just think are cool, right? As long as you know something about it and can discuss it in an interview with a level of enthusiasm and some level of knowledge, go for it. Absolutely. But put date ranges on it. Don't just say, Node. I like Node. Okay, well, that doesn't tell me anything, right? Have you done any personal projects in Node? Did a personal project in Node. Great. How long did it take you? What technologies did you use? Tell me about it. Tell me how you did it, not just that you did it, right? Explain it, put some meat on the bone. So the date ranges are the most common thing people leave out when they talk about their personal projects and self-study. So this document, Nick has a copy of. So if you guys are interested in it, you can certainly get a copy of it that way.
Yep. Just to add on to that, so for that particular document, so at the end of every meetup, probably a few days, let's say Monday, I send out a recap email. The recap email does include the on-demand video of the stream. It also includes any kind of slide, documents, etc. That the presenter wants me to send out. So if you haven't already, sign up to the newsletter on the TracyDevs.com page. I do two things. I send out the reminder that the meetup is happening, and then I send out the email that the meetup happened. That's all you're going to receive.
Nick is here to do two things: chew bubblegum and kick butt, and he's all out of bubblegum.
All right, I'll disappear for a second now.
You're good. So that's the meat and potatoes of the resume itself, like the actual technical resume writing. The reason I call this presentation the one-page resume is a myth is I will have several individuals tell me point blank, if they can fit their resume on one page, there is no way they can be qualified to do what I need done. Okay, a lot of people will tell you you have to fit your resume on one page. That information is simply outdated. Again, back in 2008, 2009, when the recession hit, there were no jobs. So anybody that posted a job would just get inundated, bombarded, like thousands of applicants in many cases. And it was too much, right? So you would think that a one-page resume would help you with that because it's briefer. The one-page resume came from a computer world where they kept physical resumes in physical file cabinets. And if you had an 8-page resume, that was too big. It would, they can't store that. So everybody wanted a one-page resume. That one page is now what I would consider an executive summary. It's okay to have one, and it's okay to bring it to the interview. It's okay to hand it to an interviewer when you meet them saying, this is my resume in case you've never seen it, right? But it's an executive summary. It's something they can read inside 3 minutes before they start the interview. Your resume, the actual resume, what you send when you apply, that's one long scrolling page. Okay, I recommend 2 to 4 pages. You don't want to make it so long that they don't bother. But there is absolutely no need to just single fit it on one page, unless you're going for some kind of design position where the aesthetics matter more than the content, and it's all about the pretty picture. Fine, okay, there's exceptions to the rule. But generally speaking, if they're going based on a Boolean search, a stack rank qualification, a zipping through it review, and then finally reading it after you've been chosen, that's probably going to be good with a 2-page document. I'd rather put more in there than less. So that's why the one-page resume is a myth. Is these resume writers, they're not bad people. They're just outdated. Their information is simply out of date by about a decade. In 2009, if you were applying for a job, you better be really qualified, and that just sort of stuck. It just never went away. So again, if you didn't write it down, you didn't do it, right? Another thing that I often find relevant is that I hear people tell me that they should know that if I did this, it means that. They need to know, and I'm like, they have to know? Like, they're going to go out of business if they don't know? Probably not. You know what I mean? Like, they don't really need to do anything. They're just chucking along, doing their thing, making money, being a company. They don't need to, they would do well to know. It would be better if they knew, sure, but they don't need to do anything. So the fact that they should know that C# is .NET, and that if you have C#, you automatically have .NET, you're rolling dice. I recommend against that kind of they have to know, they have to understand mentality, because they don't have to do anything. They're doing what they're doing. You're the one applying for the job, right? HR doesn't always know that this goes with that. I mean, HR is still confused that JavaScript isn't Java. I mean, let's be honest. So another thing that people often leave out, a common oops, is mentorship. Have you mentored anyone? More importantly than just did you mentor them, have you developed them instead of just directing them? Instead of just telling them what to do, have you actually coached and developed them and brought them forward in their skill set and their career? That's huge. right? That's the difference between a senior developer and a technical lead. You know what I mean? Anybody can tell somebody else what to do. It's a different story when you're further enabling and value adding their skill set on the team as a direct result of just you being there. Like that's tangible. So talking about the fact that you've mentored someone and putting a little bit of meat on that bone as to the fact that you developed them instead of just instructed them, huge. I always look for that in a resume. Syntax and permutations matter. Again, why just say certified project management professional when you can also say PMP, right? A certified Scrum Master versus just a Scrum Master versus just Scrum. PMP versus project management professional. How do you know what Boolean search they're using, right? If you've got more than one permutation on the same skill set, find a way to work one here and one there so that both are in the resume. That way you're bulletproof. I'd rather be bulletproof. The difference between .NET as period .NET and .NET as DOT space NET, right? .NET space core versus .NET core, no space. You know what I mean? Like you might want to work a couple different permutations of the same syntax into your resume so that you're not accidentally overlooked by a short-sighted Boolean search just in case they typed one in poorly. Again, the Control F search, they will step through your resume and grab the skill set they're looking for as a minimum qual, go up, grab the dates, write the dates down next to years of experience, go to the bottom and tally. That is how they, quote, read your resume. That's how you get credit for 8 years of experience in that, 7 years of experience in this. It's especially relevant for state or government positions. Again, the skills used subset at the end of each individual job description, that's your catch-all. They have to give you credit for that skill based on those dates if you're doing that properly. And then quantity, the size of the budget, the size of the team, differences that what your work ended up realizing, what those were, what those differences ended up being, tangible results achieved, but also pitfalls avoided. People constantly leave out, they like saw it coming and they turned the project's vehicle out of the way of the gigantic pothole. Talk about that. The fact that you actually steered clear of what would have been a real impediment to the success of this project, that's just as valuable as I saved the company X dollars, or my widget made the company X dollars. So that's another thing that a lot of people don't necessarily think about when they're writing their resume. I would say the resume is a living document. You're never really done. You can constantly adjust it for each job that you go after, because again, you want to make sure those top 3 things about that job, whatever you read in the description, the top 3 things you come away with as vital, make sure they're in your resume. Control F test your own resume. Did each of those 3 things hit 5 times? No, maybe you're not qualified yet, right? Write it down so you are qualified. Be bulletproof. You can get a free hit in the objective, a free hit in the skills summary, and then a free hit every single job you used it at. Like, it's not that hard to hit it 5 times. Again, 20 years of experience in 2 hits versus 2 years of experience in 20 hits. That matters. Not often, but it can. So again, why not be bulletproof? So that's and brevity. I mean, again, focus on, not that this is necessarily a brief speech, but focus on what's relevant about what you've done as per the job you're applying for. Magnifying glass versus complete laundry list. Speak to your target audience. If your duties weren't relevant to the job you're applying for, maybe they don't need to be on that version of the resume. Just because you did it doesn't mean you have to write it down. I've been jumping up and down through this presentation saying, write everything down, because you don't want to get missed based on the fact that you omitted it. But the reverse is also true. If you're droning on about a variety of things that just have no bearing on the job you're applying for, that might hurt you, not help you. So just be mindful of that. Brevity is still the soul of wit. You want to be thorough and bulletproof at the same time. So that's the resume. That's the nuts and bolts of the resume and kind of the stuff that people often leave out. In terms of the job hunt, in terms of your online presence and using, the internet to your advantage, there's a couple basics that I am shocked I have to tell people that yes, in fact, it's happened. Your email address, right? Your email address is probably the primary first method of contact. Recruiters will often call you, but most companies will probably email you first. It should be a no-brainer. Keep it professional, right? It's, smoky smokes at at gethigh.com is not, that's not your best email address for a resume, right? So keep it professional. Your name, some permutation of your name. It's not difficult to obtain a secondary ancillary email address that has a professional connotation if you don't want to give up the one you've had forever. Another thing is compromising photos, blog posts. Search results matter. Like, how many people in this chat have actually Googled themselves? Can be an eye-opening experience. You find a shot of yourself from college hanging from a chandelier with a drink in your hand. Like, that's not going to help your chances in the interview process. So again, you're in a highly extrapolative disqualification cipher first. They're going to look for reasons not to pick you before they look for reasons to pick you. So don't give them any. Don't give them any reasons to be like, well, that might be risky. So be aware of your online presence and what happens when thou art Googled. I would say the number one thing you can do to help your chances of getting a job is LinkedIn. LinkedIn will save you. LinkedIn is absolutely your best ally in the job hunt for a variety of reasons. For one thing, recruiters know that the resumes on LinkedIn, probably updated, probably the real thing. So use the resume you have on LinkedIn as a master document, even a slimmed down master document. You can fill in the gaps and put meat on that bone when you apply to a particular job, but the master doc should at least basically resemble the final version of the resume you're sending to these positions. Another thing about LinkedIn is, the 10,000 ants can't be wrong theory, right? So if you have recommendations on LinkedIn, not endorsements, the one click, and I have endorsements from people I don't even know. Endorsements don't mean anything to me, but recommendations do, okay? And they're very easy to get if you put some time into your profile. A lot of companies have no reference check policies, right? But if I see 5 people that gave you a recommendation on LinkedIn, even though it's not a reference check, from the company you were at, and you're like, oh, I can't get a reference from my previous company, I'm going to be a lot more comfortable because you've already got 5 recommendations from that company. So it's not exactly the same, but it's close. Many people don't conduct thorough background checks anymore. Guarantee you that HR rep's going to go to LinkedIn, look up your name. How many recommendations? Oh, 25? Probably yes. You're in the probably yes pile. Instant stage 3, right? So LinkedIn really is relevant, really is utilized, and it's your lifeline. So I cannot stress it enough. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, make one. If you have a LinkedIn profile and you haven't touched it in 8 years, revise it. A lot of people already have jobs and they're like, well, I can't refresh my resume, or they'll know I'm looking. Change your photo. Change your LinkedIn profile photo. Counts as an update. Sends a thing to all your network like, somebody updated their LinkedIn profile. It's just the photo. Even if your manager's like, why'd you update your LinkedIn? Are you looking for a job? Like, no, I just changed my photo. Old photo. On that note, I changed my photo on LinkedIn today. My photo was so old. So my girlfriend was telling me I had to update it. So it's different now. If you go to LinkedIn today, it's a different photo.
So regarding the photo part on LinkedIn, are you suggesting that somebody use a photo that is not them, like a dog, or
oh no, not at
just
all.
an unrecognizable photo that people aren't familiar with, kind of thing?
Not at all. I think your photo on LinkedIn should absolutely be you, but what's to say you can't put a quote better photo or an updated photo as opposed to the old one you had on there that you can say just look like me anymore, or I just like that photo. It's a very believable reason you can give your manager if you're trusted by your current employer as to why are you updating your LinkedIn photo, your LinkedIn profile, right? But it still sends the same blast to everybody in your network. And so-and-so updated their LinkedIn photo, they might be looking. Your LinkedIn profile and your LinkedIn photo, it's one thing. So it gives you the same level of visibility. It's a trick. So or a handy method of getting around the obvious, I guess is a better way to phrase it. So in terms of looking online for positions or job hunting online, the job websites themselves are your last stop. But a lot of people do still look for people there. So use them to your advantage. Is just know that your resume is probably harvested and put into a database so that people can reuse it. That's why I like putting your phone number, your city, and your email, but not your exact home address. You know what I mean? It's a little better if they don't have your exact home address, but they do know what city you're in. Again, the on-site versus remote thing, that'll all come in. A lot of job sites already harvest resumes. So Indeed, for example, pulls resumes from all over the place. So you post on one or two, you're probably posted on several, but depending on how hard you're looking, if you're actually unemployed and you really want to open it up, use the job sites to your advantage. But again, I have a biased opinion. I work for an agency, but agencies make a big difference. If you're able to get in touch with people that know managers that are hiring directly and are not submitting through some system portal that can go to that manager and have a one-on-one conversation as to why this person is ideal, way better than just crossing your fingers and hoping you get noticed.
Do you have a top 3 job site list?
No. Short answer, no. I like Indeed, but it's not something I go to look for resumes. I just know that Indeed does a lot of harvesting. So Indeed it's a good aggregate. Career Builder, people use Monster, people used to use Dice. I don't go to job websites very often. I find them to be the last stop on my list because, I'd rather go to LinkedIn and look you up directly. I'd rather get referred to you by someone I already know who says you're legit. I'd rather pick a company that has a strong team and see if you're on it, that kind of stuff. So the job sites are my last stop. So I don't really have, absolute favorites. All I'm saying is don't disregard them, use them to your advantage, but try to make direct personal one-on-one contacts as well. I would rate LinkedIn vastly ahead of the job websites. It's exponentially, it's orders of magnitude more important. So LinkedIn's my favorite site. There's a better way to answer that. So does anybody have any other questions so far? I mean, I have a few other things I can get into. We can talk about COVID. We can talk about the current state of affairs in the industry. But that's a lot of data, and I don't want to just talk at you. So if anyone else has any questions, please let me know.
I'll let people ask questions in the chat. I have a few questions up my sleeve to keep you going on the subject until other questions pop up. You mentioned that it's important to have recommendations received, like written ones. What other aspects of LinkedIn are the most critical? Because when I browse people I know on LinkedIn, I mean, I'm looking at profiles that are all over the map as far as completion or what they have.
Yeah. So the more meat you can put on the bone, the more appetizing a meal it is, right? So if you have a great resume on LinkedIn and it has all the detail in it, great. But it can still be a skeletal framework. So it doesn't have to be a work of art, but the dates on those positions always have to match the date on your resume. That's very important. The way if you don't already have a bunch of recommendations, it's easy to get them. Okay, just think about everywhere you've ever worked, literally, and think of anyone you had any respect for at that organization, literally, right? Like anyone you just thought had their act together. Underlings, superiors, direct reports, new hires, total vets, whatever, right? Reach out to them on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Once they connect, say, I was impressed by working with you. I'd be happy to provide you a recommendation if you'd like one. Really appreciate it if you could return the favor. You do that 10, 15 people a day for 2 months, you'll end up with 50 recommendations. If I'm an HR rep and I look at your resume and I see 50 people on your LinkedIn that recommended you, I'm like, this person's probably legit. Poof, in the probably yes pile.
So we have a question coming in from Daniel. In case you can't see it on the screen, it's What do you think about applying for jobs that you think are a little higher than your current skill set? Basically, how confident should you be about applying for those roles? Great question.
Like outstanding question. You sort of provided me a good segue into the next section of my thing. I will often give this talk at user groups back when in person was a thing. And people will come up after and they're like, hey, how do I break into this? I don't know if I'm qualified for this. Like, how do I get from A to B? How do I get experience if I don't already have some? All these jobs are asking for experience. There's one trick that works really, really well for that. Either if you're getting started from scratch or if you're just trying to pick up extra steam. What I would suggest is co-working facilities, Hacker Lab, Urban Hive, startup meetups, especially co-founder entrepreneurial meetups or early company accelerators, angel investor type meetups. They're all over the place. They're very easy to find. The reason I suggest those is that these people always need coders, right? They need salespeople, they need coders, they need people that will drum up rainmakers. They need people that are able to provide a skill set that they don't necessarily have themselves that will enable their idea or their company in the early stages. 9 times out of 10, they can't pay you, right? 9 times out of 10, you get sweat equity, and when we hit it big, you can buy a yacht. Yeah, okay. Most of those companies fail, but if the people that are giving you access to do that work for them for free out of the goodness of your heart have a legitimate LinkedIn profile themselves, if they look good on LinkedIn, if you do that work, you get that experience, and they give you not just a recommendation, but also volunteer as a legit reference check. Somebody like me can call and say, hey, did this person work for you? Great. Did they do this work for you? Great. Cool. Thanks. Right. That gives you validation and experience that you wouldn't have otherwise had. Ideally, in the very skill set that you're looking for, right? Let's say you've gone to a code camp and you're a burgeoning developer, and you've got all this knowledge about React and you've never used it, and you've kind of played with it on your own. You've done some personal projects, and you got that on the resume. It's keyword searchable, but it's like you don't actually have experience doing it. I don't really care that much if it's paid experience. I'd rather it be paid experience. It's better, but it's not verbatim separate. Experience is experience. If I have a reference check and a legit person with a company that was real, and you actually did this work for a real world thing with a real world setting, I don't care if you got $30 an hour, $130 an hour, or $0 an hour. I mean, I care a little, but I don't care a lot, right? It's basically the same thing. So wander the halls, literally wander the halls, either virtually or otherwise, of these meetings, get names, and volunteer your skills. Anybody need a coder? Anybody need a business analyst? Anybody need a salesperson? Like, you have the ability to offer yourself up for free. You do that enough times, they're going to say yes. And that's how, basically for me, you get 2 reference checks that are legitimate and actual real world work. You're off to the races. I have a very hard time hiring people right out of a code camp. It's extremely difficult to get a client to bite on that. But if I have 2 reference checks, even for 2-month projects you did off hours on your own for free, but you can talk about what you did, what skills you used, and how you used them in the interview, you're good. So a really easy way to get over that hurdle without actually getting hired is to create the job yourself and just, wander the halls.
Before I ask the question that Alex has put up, I have a follow-up question for what you just said.
Okay.
So you said you're looking for the referral, and in the circumstance where these are unpaid gigs, how do you list that? Are you listing it as a project, or are you listing it as a potentially short-term job? And if it's a short-term job, don't employers frown upon that still?
Okay, so yes, the short-term job, more to the point, short-term job after short-term job after short-term job means you can't hold a long-term job, means you might be a risk. Okay, so that's what employers frown upon. That's work experience, right? That's where less than 6-month stints aren't necessarily good for you. If you're there more than 6 months, you were probably good. If you're there more than a year, you were definitely good, right? But then you have your education section, which separates work experience out. Then you have your additional study and personal project section. This is where you have carte blanche. Anything in here cannot be construed as trying to masquerade as formal experience. I would say that depending on how legitimate that project was that you did for that company, I'd even consider putting it in work experience. But if you're worried about that hurting you somehow, then you can always just put it down here, especially if it was only 2 weeks long or 1 month long. But again, if you have no experience and you're, for lack of a better phrase, waiting tables or whatever, but you went to a code camp and you're a ninja coder, but nobody knows it because nobody's going to give you a shot yet. Yeah, I'll put it in work experience. Some experience is better than none. You can always change it later. Again, the resume is a living document. I hope that helps.
I wasn't sharing your screen. I didn't know you. I didn't see that you were sharing it, but
Oh,
I
good.
think you got your point across. There's a question from Alex here. I'll put it up on the screen and I'll read it. What do you think is one thing that junior developers most leave out of their resume?
Well, I mean, a junior developer to me is somebody that is anywhere from 0 years experience, but knowledge base, up through 1+ year of experience. You get to about 2 solid years of actively coding, you're kind of verging on mid-level. So junior is a very subjective term. What does someone more or less brand new leave out of their resume more often than not? I think they will rarely include, they'll talk about what they did. They don't always talk about how they did it. I used React. Great. What'd you do with it? The fact that it was there. Another danger zone that junior developers include too much of in the resume is what the team did, right? I'm not hiring the team. I'm hiring you. I don't care what the team did. If you were in the room when someone else was performing brain surgery, that does not give you brain surgery experience. That makes you a lethal risk. You do not have brain surgery experience. You were in the room, right? So, if they did all this great stuff with the application and that doesn't mean you did it. So, but you did something while you were there. Talk about what you did. And if you do want to describe all that rest of it as keyword searchable and give you that extra edge in the resume to at least get noticed, caveat it appropriately, right? The team was doing this. My specific role was doing this. That's okay. But, don't, I see a lot of that, unfortunately, from resumes coming overseas. Is they're like, I have 10 years experience doing this. And it's like, you find out they have 2 because the team was doing it. They were watching. It's not the same thing. So with people that are, in code camps, separating academic experience from real world experience is very worthwhile. If you did some sort of real world example for an actual company, say so. You know what I mean? Just if it was you at home on a computer alone doing homework, it's not that real world. But again, if your code camp for whatever reason partnered with Accenture and was doing this side project for, even if it was small, say so. Distinguish the more detail and the more meat you can put on that bone. Give me a reason to pick you. You know what I mean? Don't just state the skill set and cross your fingers. Put some meat on that bone.
This is great. If you have more questions in the chat, please keep them coming because this is a great opportunity. I know a lot of people struggle even getting that phone call from their resume. So this is your opportunity to talk to an actual recruiter about the tips and tricks here. So were you still gonna segue into something, Josh?
Well, that was my what if I don't have any experience? How can I get started?
Yeah.
Getting those 2 reference checks under your belt, even if you haven't been hired yet, that's one way that's a trick to do it. The entrepreneurial people trying to get funding and trying to get a company off the ground, you can get into those meetings. You'll probably find somebody that doesn't mind hiring you for free. They like that. So what has happened with regards to COVID and the industry as a whole? I want to rewind it about 10 years. I want to go back to the 2008-2009 recession when there were almost no jobs and it was a hirer's market for sure. A lot of people turned to the resume writing companies or facilities and just didn't realize that they were giving them outdated information, that they were trying to squeeze it onto one page. That I just don't recommend doing that. Again, be aware of what happens after you hit send and write the resume for that kind of a scenario. I don't care what format it's in, as long as it takes care of those 4 stages effectively. You want the same document to survive all 4 well. Everything changed again in 2020 with COVID. COVID literally showed the industry as a whole that remote was valid. And man, did you have a lot of managers that didn't want to learn that lesson. Oh, they just, you see fingernail marks down every one of those, they didn't want to let it go, right? So it has resulted in a really unique discussion in the industry that I've heard a bunch of times, I've never heard conducted this way. And that is remote the answer? And it's evolving. It's changing month to month. Right now, where I think it's at right now, you've got about 2/3 of the country, ballpark 60-70% of the companies implementing a return to office policy. That RTO is coming, right? It's about September, October-ish timeframe, but they're doing it. Unless the new Delta variant literally smacks the United States upside the head and forces us into another major shutdown, shy of something severe like that, RTO is going to take place. There's 2 competing philosophies, right? There's the happy workers are effective workers. If I'm happy, it's because I'm working from home. You trust me. I'm a professional. You're treating me like a professional, and I'm doing my job, and I'm doing it well. So what's the problem, right? That's argument one, and it's compelling because everybody saw it work. You can't say you didn't see it work. You were here the last year. Everybody worked from home. The other one is team members that are face to face are more invested in each other. It's something about that human face-to-face interaction where you're not just on a screen. I've actually sat across from you. I've given you a fist bump. Maybe we did lunch or happy hour, whatever it is. Like that team camaraderie, that symbiosis and cohesion, it is tangibly advanced by being in person at least some of the time. And there are managers that still stick to that. Which is more important? Which is more beneficial? Which is more effective? I think that's the discussion we're hashing out right now. I think a lot of people were under the impression that, again, the companies have to realize that everything's remote now, and that's just the way of things, and they're idiots if they don't. Do they have to? Or would they be better served to, right? They're better served to. They're going to lose a lot of their senior people if they don't implement some kind of all remote policy. Yep. A lot of those senior people are just going to up and bounce. They're Casper. And the market's happy to gobble them up right now. This is kind of what I wanted to talk about was, if you are not in your dream job and you're qualified and you really have skills to bring to bear, it's out there. You might have to work East Coast hours, but I guarantee there is a 100% remote company absolutely interested in hiring you for exactly what you've always wanted to do at a decent rate. It is out. You might have to wait a little while, but it's out there. There's no doubt that statistically speaking, you can find that. And that has really introduced a unique dynamic that was not there before. People were geographically limited. You couldn't just ask your dream job and get it just because you were qualified and you deserved it. It didn't work that way. You might have to move to, Arizona and whatever. It's not a thing anymore. So a lot of top talent is getting poached, and they're getting poached consistently enough that rates have gone up. Companies that are demanding this return to office usually is a hybrid, 2 to 3 days a week on site, but requiring it, you got to live here. They're paying better, and raises are a thing, and they are starting to catch on that the market has really, again, for the upper echelon talent, has really opened up their eyes and said, wait a minute, we can get the developer we always wanted as long as we pony up. That's worth noting. So it's twofold. I also think that being willing to go on site, even as part-time, as a hybrid, full-time, whatever, some of the time working from the office gives you a tangible advantage over to a lot of people that have just crossed their arms and said, you're not getting me back into the office ever again, never. It's just not necessary. COVID proved it wasn't necessary. Companies have to realize, otherwise, they're idiots. I doubt a lot of companies are going to go out of business if they don't realize that. They might lose some of their top people, but they're going to stay in business, and they're going to replace them with other top people eventually. So it's kind of like a half bidding war, half philosophical debate. And it comes oftentimes down to the individual line level manager or the director of that division as to what their philosophy is. So it's very interesting to watch it play out. For a while there, it was 50-50, right? Literally half the companies were all about remote, and remote for indefinitely. Perm jobs, 100%. Like, I'll give you the base package with the salary and every benefit you've ever wanted. And here's just all the money in the world. Remote forever, right? That was going around about February. That was the show. And we were all attending the, oh my God, I'm losing all my good people show. Recruiters loved it because they were like, anybody I find that's willing to take a job, I can get them a job anywhere for what they've always wanted. That's slowed down a little. Now it's about 60-40, 70-30. But it's still a thing. I mean, it's the same force is driving. I just think that a lot of the people that wanted to, do that have done that. So there's less of it. I think there's going to be plenty more of it next February. So I think it's a permanent factor in the market from here on out. It's interesting to watch.
So, Josh, similar topic, but slightly different as well. And this, I think, goes back to what you were saying on boot camps and things like that. But the last few companies that I've worked for, they've been anti anyone except for senior and above level positions. And I don't know if that's the norm or not, but if you're a junior level developer or you're a new grad and you're trying to get the extra project-based experience or the referrals, but you're still not considered senior level, what kind of advice do you have for them?
Be conscientious of the projects you're taking and get involved in projects that are in high demand. The last thing that I'll talk about is what skill sets are being hired for most. Um, right now, it's all about cloud. It's all about microservices, and it's all about some iteration of DevOps or people that are doing things in the modern approach. You know what I mean? Like I used to tell people, no web services, no love, right? Because everybody had to have web services. Well, now they're deconstructing those monolithic web services and they're putting them into microservices. Well, now they're doing that with the cloud and the people that have the AWS or Azure, the people that like they really want to talk to. And it's all about Kafka and Docker and Kubernetes and like, have you had any DevOps experience? And it's the more marketable stuff, any of the modern JavaScript frameworks, any of them, React, Angular, Vue, Node, any of them, right? Any modern JavaScript. That's what people are looking for. So if you have the ability, even as a junior or mid-level developer, to make use of those skill sets on that project, that's what I'd angle towards. You have the ability to pick this project to that project. I would just walk through fire to pick the project that everybody's hiring those skill sets for. It just gets you better, faster, more marketable, more quickly. Yes and. So in lieu of doing side work that gets you the exact experience you've always wanted, try to angle forward at your company if you can get a hold of it.
Makes sense. And then you personally at TekSystems, what kind of levels do you work with? Are you working with senior or all across the board?
I mean, don't get me wrong, me likey senior, right? Like, highly qualified people. Oh, that sounds terrible. Why would I want to hire the best? Like, you know what I mean? So, but there's something to be said for, hiring Ben versus Yoda. You know what I mean? Like, you don't necessarily, like, I'm Yoda. I'm the best coder ever. Well, they don't need Yoda. They need Ben. They need a Jedi, but they don't need Yoda. Like, that's kind of overkill, right? So being the best that they've ever seen and looking for the highest rate anyone's ever gotten and, just this immaculate perfection level of this is all I'm willing to consider. Sure, again, now that we have all the remote in the world, that's much more of a reality. That's actually probably more realistic nowadays. But your level of qualification isn't necessarily going to dictate the role. What the company needs done will dictate the role, right? So being super crazy senior, if you're competing with somebody who's just senior, maybe they're a better fit, even though you're better at what they do. So that's something to bear in mind. But by the same token,
HR take that into consideration. Sorry to interrupt. Will HR take that into consideration? Because remember, they are usually not skilled. They'll look for keywords and they'll look at date ranges.
The short answer is, I mean, with some exceptions, HR does what they're told, right? If the manager says we're hiring this person, very few HR reps are going to be like, nah, they're probably going to do what they told. So, the person you want to win over is the hiring decision maker, not HR. But you got to get through HR to get to that person. So again, make sure your resume panders to the entire pantheon of that audience, all four stages, so to speak. But what I would also say is that most people don't know exactly where mid-level is. Okay, 2 to 5 years is the sweet spot. Oh my God, 2 to 5 years of experience in any technical skill set. People have no idea they can double their wage. They have no idea because you're no longer junior, right? You're not an actual risk on the project where somebody has to hold your hand the entire time, but you're not senior yet. You can't just be alone and directing everything and leading the team into the trenches, but you're a highly capable, effective worker that doesn't need a whole lot of mentorship and can probably learn on their own and get things done and can even handle some really wicked curveballs, right? That's huge. People are still often making junior level rates when they're 2 and 3 years deep, when they could be making almost senior level rates. So, getting a 50% raise round about your 4th or 5th year in the field, totally viable, especially again, now with all the remote stuff. You know what I mean? If you can talk the talk and really walk the walk, all you got to do is get in a room, virtually or otherwise, with somebody that knows what they're talking about. You're going to come away with that job offer. Something somebody told me early in my career that I should have known, but it hit me like an epiphany was nobody does an interview because they're bored. They're not in an interview just because they want to shoot the breeze and talk turkey with technical people. And it sounds like fun. They want to hire you, right? They're there to see if you can do the job. They'd rather be done. Like that's good for them. Let's hire this person, right? So in a way, just getting in that interview room is the brass ring. That's the achievement. You know what I mean? You have to be qualified. You have to know what you're doing. you should probably even interview well and maybe practice ahead of time and be prepared with questions they ask. So, it's not a breeze, but like just getting that far. If you're qualified, odds are really good you might get that job. So, you know what I mean? Like if you think you're the bomb and you've only got 4 years experience, aim high. Like they might just pull the trigger. Another thing I'll add, recently I've seen a lot more HackerRank, which is good. I think HackerRank's better than some of the other testing tools out there, but I've seen a lot more code challenges that are not HackerRank. Independent, individual, the company asks you to do this, that, and the other thing and show it to them when you're done on a GitHub. Code challenges. That allows them to conduct the interview based on how you code now, today, not how your last company forced you to code or what environment you were stuck in before you got to this interview. So a lot of people are like, I don't want to do a code challenge. It sounds like a lot of work for a job I don't even have. I'm not getting paid. That code challenges allows you to have a present tense snapshot of your skill set. If you're a mid-level person, that code challenge is the best thing you've ever seen because you can code at a highly adept level, get treated in the interview like a highly adept coder, and maybe even get paid accordingly and get the job you've always wanted. So please don't sneer at a code challenge. It actually gives you more of an advantage than you think.
So we have a question coming in from Daniel. I'll put it up on the screen. It says, hey, Josh, would you say there's some sort of drive in junior and younger devs that have, and could that be an advantage for junior devs?
Yeah, is being hungry an advantage? And the answer is obviously yes, right? The human factor goes a long way in an interview, right? We often call it the tail wagger factor. Like it's like, oh, put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. Oh my God, let's do this. You know what I mean? Like that bodes well. A good portion of that hiring manager's decision is going to be based on how you add to that cohesive mentality, that vibe, that morale on the team. If you're jazzed out of your mind to even be there and you're willing to do whatever they want, including all the garbage work that the senior guys don't want to do, and they're like, I'd love to, give me maintenance, woohoo! Like, yeah, of course that's an advantage. I think that's always going to matter. Experience trumps everything. There's people with mediocre attitudes that get the job because they have better experience. And there's more than one way to get that experience. Again, if you're missing X and Z, but you got Y, fill in the blanks, at least fill in one of them. You know what I mean? Personal projects count. Get them on your resume, put dates on them so they know how long you've been doing it. That way you can talk about it effectively. Experience projects, even if it's not for pay, count even more. Get 1 or 2 of those. Like, participate in your own rescue, so to speak.
Makes sense. And I just want to plug it out there that I think if you're interested in presenting at the Tracy Developer Meetup, it is a great resume item. If you present on a technical topic, would you agree, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, go for it. I will take an opportunity to self plug if you don't mind.
Please plug away.
I am definitely hiring. I'm swimming in jobs. Most of them are technical, quality assurance, senior development, technical architects, technical leads, but also line level coders. Some junior, plenty of mid, and a whole truckload of senior. So I usually refer to it as the 3 U's, right? If you're underpaid, underappreciated, or underemployed, we fix that. So sending me your resume does not have to be a verbatim agreement that you're going to take a job. I often will help people with regards to just filling them in on what the market's doing, helping them optimize their resume. If you can use what I've given you to help go get a job, remember the little guy 2 years later, right? Like, you become a manager, call me to hire people. But in the meantime, if there's a symbiosis we can put together on me being able to help you get where you want to go more quickly than you're already doing it, most of the people I hire don't need jobs, right? They need a better job. Most of the people I hire, they're not hurting, and it's not often about the money. I make 140K, do I want to make 150K? Sure, they'll take the money. I'll take an extra 10 grand. They don't need an extra 10 grand. Yeah, they're fine. So the money is not going to dislodge someone from being gainfully employed to take a risk with their career and all the upheaval that involves. But going where they want to go in their career path, getting access to the technology they want to work with, filling in that one missing blank of the thing they really want to do and they know is relevant, but their company's just not going to be doing for 5 years if they're lucky, like that's relevant, that's tangible. And that's usually what I try to bring to the table is getting someone the job they want as opposed to just a job. So if anyone's interested, please hit me with your resume. Nick has my email address, but it's jgurin@teksystems.com, JGURIN@TekSystems with an S at the end.com.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I will be including that email address in the recap email that I sent shortly after this this meetup as well. And an ask that I have is, if you did reach out to Josh, or you even participated in this meetup and you it led to you being hired somewhere or improving some scenario, please report back. Shoot me an email, respond to the email. I want to hear those success stories, and Josh probably does too, so I can forward it to him.
Everybody loves a win.
Yes. I have a question coming in from Victoria, and I put it on the screen. So slightly off topic, say you make it to the first interview stage, but then they haven't reached out to you for a while. What and when is an appropriate follow-up response?
Okay, great question. Leads me into something that I didn't even talk about, which is, people that don't get any responses when they apply to jobs, but it's on the same vein. So always send a thank you note. Thank you notes are key, okay? And it's not just a thank you note. I would recommend sandwiching in, repeating what went well, shoring up what went shaky, and ending it with the same way you'd end it anyway. So instead of just saying, thanks for taking the time to interview me, really look forward to hopefully being part of your team, looking forward to next steps, right? That's your standard thank you note. What I mean by sandwich it in is, thanks for interviewing me. I really enjoyed the interview. I especially enjoyed the part where we talked about ... the part that went well, right? After the interview, I thought about the thing you said about the stuff that was weak, and I couldn't help myself. I had to look it up, and it's just this right here. I really appreciate you bringing that to my attention, and it's an area I'm looking forward to diving deeper into. Really hope to be able to be part of your team. Thanks again. Looking forward to next steps, right? So sandwich in reinforcing what went well and shoring up what went poorly in the interview follow-up email or letter. If you're lucky enough to interview in person during COVID, ask for a business card. Ask for a business card. It's the easiest way to get their email address. Most professionals, especially hiring managers, typically have one. If they don't, you can send it via LinkedIn, but I find LinkedIn messages to be less effective. You're probably going to want a direct email if you can get it. So that's step one, is the thank you email. Maximum 48 hours, probably less than 24. But you don't necessarily do it right after the interview. I would recommend the very next day or the day after at most. Why? Keeps you in front of their mind, right? Keeps you forefront in their thoughts while they're making their final decision, and you're reinforcing the part that went well. So, it doesn't hurt. Something else at the end of the interview, always have questions. Okay, not patronizing questions, not stuff you should already know, like what technologies are you using? Because you should know that by the time you get to the interview. But questions that are either relevant, that came up in the interview, have questions prepared. A lack of questions equals a lack of interest. Okay, so if you are at the end of the interview and it's the most thorough interview ever, and they've answered all kinds of stuff, and they're like, okay, great, well, do you have any questions for us? And you're like, no, that was incredible. Like, you literally covered everything. This is great. I don't have any questions. You basically don't want that job. It is highly possible that they will extrapolate from that you're not interested, despite that not being the case. So always have questions at the end. You run out of questions, they covered everything. A couple backups you can use I find really, really effective. One is, let's say you were to hire me. I'm not making any assumptions, but let's just say 6 months from now, what will I need to have done to ensure you felt like you made the right decision? It ends the interview in terms of them thinking of you in terms of you actually performing the job, and it might open up a topic that wasn't broached earlier. Another variation of the same question is, let's say you were to offer me the job. I'm not being presumptive, but let's just say, what would be the very first thing in queue that you would task me with? What is literally first on the to-do list for this role? Again, might give an opportunity for them to mention something they didn't mention in the questions they were asking. Like, it's funny you bring that up. I did that here, and I'm really good at it, and here's why. Right? Again, it ends the interview with them thinking of you in terms of you performing the duties, and it gives you one last chance to express why you might be that much more qualified than the next person. So 2 backup questions at the end really come in handy. After the follow-up letter, after the thank you note, how often do you follow up? I usually do it the very next day of the very next week, and then I spread it out 1 week, adding at a time as kind of a polynomial permutation beyond that. So, I interview on Wednesday. I send a follow-up note on Thursday. I recap on the following Monday. I recap the next Monday, then I recap 2 Mondays after that, then I recap 3 Mondays after that. And if at that point they haven't hired you, all you're doing at that point is keeping yourself on their radar, and that's fine, right? So this leads into what I was going to talk about. I've talked to some people that have not worked in an excessive period of time, or took time out as a homemaker for a really long time, or feels like technology has passed them by and they used to be amazing and now they barely know what's going on. Whatever the case, right? If you feel like no one's giving you the time of day and your efforts are just not getting a response at all, what I would recommend, and it's kind of time consuming, but let's, like, Malcolm Gladwell's your friend, right? Let the statistics hit a tipping point in your favor eventually. The way you do that is you apply to jobs, get some point of contact. Often it's HR, but if you can get a person, an actual hiring manager, even better. Keep a ridiculously detailed Excel spreadsheet of when you applied to that job, what happened, and who was involved, and reach out to them every 3 weeks. I often thank them for their help, even if they never helped you, right? Even if they never even responded. Thanks again for your help. Just wanted to let you know I'm still in the market and very interested. If you have anything at all come up with these skills, let me know. Thanks. You do that every 3 weeks, maybe every 3 months, but probably every 3 weeks. You do it en masse for every single job that was posted in your skill set that you can possibly get a hold of, and you track it all. You do that for 3 or 6 months in a row, you're going to have more of an Excel spreadsheet with the hiring managers in your local area than anybody else. Better than most companies, better than most agencies, depending on your level of diligence. And you're thanking all of them for their help every 3 weeks. At some point, there's a tipping point, statistically speaking, somebody's got to respond. So if you are out there like, nobody's answering anything I send, that's because you're in the pile. Look at your resume and look at the format of your resume. Is it surviving all 4 stages effectively, right? Maybe you're weak on one. Have you control F your own resume? What are the top 3 skills that particular job is looking for? Are you adjusting it slightly every single time? Have versions of your resume in the Excel spreadsheets. You know which one you sent to who. Anything you can do to give yourself an edge where it sometimes is a matter of not what you know, it's who you know. And so that brings me back to agencies are kind of, an advantage. I happen to work for one, may have a biased opinion, just forewarning, but their job is to know people, right? Their job is to get past the pile. Your resume doesn't just end up on the pile and you're crossing your fingers hoping you get noticed. They actually have one-on-one conversations with decision makers, tell them why you're qualified instead of just hoping that you get seen. So make use of them as well.
So I have a question regarding that, I think. You said find somebody within the company and message them. Would you advise to go on LinkedIn, and I think it costs money. I think that to do in-mail to find hiring managers on LinkedIn and send them direct messages instead?
I think before you invest money, you look at the return of investment, right? It depends on how desperate you are. What I just gave in the way of suggestions of collecting those contacts and pinging them every 3 weeks and doing that en masse until you literally overwhelm the universe with your willpower, that's kind of a long shot approach, right? Be easier to just get picked. Paying money for in-mail to reach out to people that wouldn't have otherwise talked to you, do they really want to hear from you? Right? What's even better and free is try to connect with them. Find the head of HR that does technical hiring. Send them an invite, right? Maybe they just don't say yes, but somebody will. Once they've connected with you on LinkedIn of their own accord, naturally, you can send them an email through LinkedIn for free. You don't need in-mail, right? In-mail is for people you're not connected with. So again, use your network to your advantage. It's who you know, not just what you know. Have you ever worked with anyone that went to any other companies ever? Connect with them on LinkedIn, right? Send them a message. Hey, are you guys hiring at all? What's your company doing? Who's in charge of your HR for hiring? Can I email, So, send a link. So anyway, I don't want to tell you no, because it might work for some people, but there's another way to do the same thing that doesn't cost money. It's just a little longer.
Got it. No, this is all fantastic advice, and we've got a lot of great questions coming so far. Is there any other questions for Josh? I mean, this is your opportunity. This kind of opportunity doesn't come around that often. Do you have any other golden nuggets of advice, is what people are calling them in the chat?
The common sense stuff, like when you do a video interview, don't have dirty dishes in the background and books that are piled up with papers everywhere. It looks like a small bomb went off on your bookshelf. Don't have dirty laundry and an unmade bed in your background. It's just an interview is a highly extrapolative environment. They're going to take little tiny things and make giant conclusions from them. I recently interviewed for a promotion at my company, and I said something about how I trained a lot of my supervisors myself, because I've been here forever, and my role doesn't necessarily go in the same career path as their role, and so they ended up with a supervisory nature to me. And I said, it's like, oh well, and they'd come at me with some subject, and I'd be like, I never told you about this. Here's the deal about that, because I know more than you do on that subject, right? They took it as I have trouble taking direction from people that have been at the company less time than me. I'm difficult to manage. I'm like, that is not what I said at all. I was just saying I trained some of my own, managers, and I didn't get to that stuff. So I educated them, even though they were my manager. It was received completely the wrong way in the interview. And I had no idea, man. I was clueless. During the interview debrief, they actually told me. I was like, whoa, oh, okay, well, that's good to know. Won't do that again. So, interviews are incredibly extrapolative environments. You'll think that they're harmless and innocuous, and they might not be. So just, be cognizant of what you're saying.
Sweet. I'm thinking people might be out of questions for now. I just want to maybe put out some plugs for the group, and then if something else trickles in, we'll circle back. So TekSystems.com is the primary site for all of these meetups for the Tracy Developer Meetup. I do list them on meetup.com and Eventbrite as well, but TekSystems.com has the most recent information. And if you go there right now, you'll notice that it's kind of dry. As far as meetups, we have a few more about to pop up on the calendar. We meet once per month. So just check back in about a week and you'll see some new ones pop up on the calendar. I'm getting them finalized. And if you ever want to speak at the Tracy Developer Meetup, you could be a new grad, you could be a lead developer, it doesn't matter. Let me know. I'd love to get you sharing something cool that you're working on for the group. We see the dot point says, thanks for sharing, Josh. Other than that, I think we're good. What do you think, Josh?
All right.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for coming out on your Friday. We're going to still remain meeting remotely probably till the end of the year now that we have COVID circling back again. But one day we will meet in person again. I got a question from Daniel. How do I reach out? I believe I have the email address on the TekSystems.com page if you're referring to if you want to present. In regards to Josh's email, I'll be including that in the follow-up email that I send out probably by the end of the weekend. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your night or morning.